Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 97.
Congratulations, you showed up. Give yourself a high five in celebration of your success. Welcome to the Cashflow Diary, where new and experienced investors come to take confident action towards their goals. Your host is a family man, a real estate entrepreneur, investor, coach, and instructor. As a master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow 101 game, he's inspired many to begin their journey into creating cash flow for themselves and their family. And now, here he is to offer you the tools required to earn the income desired. Your cash flow coach, Jay Massey.
All right, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I am your host, Jay Massey, and you know what I'm excited about? I'm excited because today, even though you are probably listening to me in your home country, we're going to talk about investing in another country. And what's most important about that is understanding this. Real estate plays everywhere, and that's what I love about it. Everyone needs a place to live, work, play, or lay. And I don't care what language you speak, what country you're from, the principles are the same. Now, the rules are different, and there are different things to pay attention to, but you want to become an excellent investor. You want to diversify your cash flow. You want to make sure that you have a portfolio that is resilient across many different markets. International investing is where it's at, in my opinion. And today's guest is the premier expert in that particular arena. Now, if this is your first time joining us, here's what I want to say. I want to say that your job is to educate yourself, because that's what I want you to do. I want you to become a bigger, better, badder investor than you are today. Even if you've done deals before, here's what I'm asking you to do. Go over to learninvestingnow.com, because when you go over to learninvestingnow.com, what we've put together is a series of emails, series of courses and information that will allow you to begin that real estate investing journey in the easiest manner possible, so that you can begin to educate yourself, understand the language, be able to know the top things that you must have in your mind to make sure that you're making educated, excellent decisions as you go out there and attack the marketplace and build your cash flow. So when you go over to learninvestingnow.com, it's just name and email. It'll be very, very simple, and have fun too. Now, today's guest comes to us from many different places in the world and has the ability to understand marketplaces in a very unique way, because he's done that. He's been doing it for a number of years. Think about it this way. He's been involved in real estate since the age of 22 now. I don't know how old you are, but let me ask you this. What were you doing when you were 22? My guess is not buying real estate, or at least not as much as you would have liked. And he has bought and sold real estate in 5 different countries and been living overseas since the age of 27 on a full-time basis. That's amazing to me, because I know one thing. I get used to the U.S. bubble, if you will. At least that's what I call it. And more importantly, he has broken out of the USA bubble and is now living in other countries. And I definitely think that if you've got feet on the street, he's going to have a different perspective for us today. He's the host of the #1 rated overseas Property Insider podcast with listeners in over 80 countries, and has spoken with the likes of presidents of the world's largest house sitting site, the senior vice president of the #1 vacation and rental marketplace, the president of the premier self-directed 401 company, and dozens of House Hunters International and Live Here By This alums from all over the globe. Now, if you're like me, you watch House Hunters and you watch House Hunters International and you see those photos and you go, wow, that would be great to wake up to. And what's interesting is that he wakes up to those pictures every day. Today's guest is Taylor White, and he delivers honest and accurate overseas real estate information by doing it himself, having started with less than no money, and you know I love that part, and understanding how working hard trumps secrets any day of the week. Do me a favor and welcome Taylor White. Taylor, you there?
Jay, I am here, and I'm very excited, my friend.
Excellent, and I'm glad to hear that. So tell us, for those of us who don't know, where are you today?
I'm currently in the Dominican Republic in an awesome little beach town called Las Terrenas, which is about a 3-hour drive or so from the capital, Santo Domingo.
You know what? I bet you we just expanded some minds right there. They're like, where's that? And totally understood. So one of the things that I like to start out conversations with is I always want to know how people became who they were. I look at entrepreneurs today as like yesterday's superheroes, and every superhero has a beginning. They have an origin story. Something happened to them. Usually if you're a superhero, it happened in your childhood, but it happened to you. And then you became endowed with superpowers and you've taken on the cause for other people. So before Taylor White was Taylor White, what I'd like to know is who was Taylor White?
Great question, Jay. And I was born and raised in sunny San Diego, California, which is a little Southern California. Sometime around the age of 19 or so, I was a part owner in a pizza place with my father. And I knew at that time, Jay, that running a small business, a brick and mortar business was not for me. And I said, how can I make some more money? So that's when I got involved in reading a lot of great books from a lot of great authors, ones I'm sure that you're very familiar with. Donald Trump and Richard Kiyosaki, Robert Allen, No Money Down, fantastic book. And I started reading these books and started to understand the principles. And around the age of 21 or 22 is when I started to put some of these into practice. And that's when I bought my first place in San Diego for no money down. It was an apartment. I can still remember this apartment, Jay, in San Marcos for $114,000. Bought it zero down. Did it for 100% financing. This was sometime right after September 11th. So all the interest rates dropped. So there was all these amazing creative opportunities there for financing if you went after it. I started to buy and sell in San Diego as well as a few towns just north of San Diego. And then I started to travel a little bit, Jay, and I went to some great spots, Argentina and Thailand and Uruguay and Panama. And I said, I love real estate. And I love to travel. So how can I combine these things? And it just so happened in San Diego by the company International Living, they had a conference in San Diego about living and investing overseas. And at this conference, there was a dynamic husband and wife real estate team from Buenos Aires, Argentina, Reynolds Properties, who's still there. They're fantastic, Paul and Maria. And they were presenting pre-construction buys. And Jay, I definitely don't recommend this, but I was enthralled with their pre-construction buys at the conference in San Diego for places in Buenos Aires. And that's where I bought my first place, sight unseen, but that's how I started my buying and selling real estate overseas.
You know, what's amazing to me about that is I just love the patterns that evolve. And I hope everyone saw, or at least hear some of the same things is that, you began by reading and educating, but you didn't let it stop there. And so many of us fail to take that next step and putting it into action. And there was a time for reading and then there's a time for action. And you decided that, hey, you know what? Enough is enough. Now, the first question though is, that I find very interesting is that, a pizza business or businesses, brick and mortar or otherwise, they have the ability to generate cash flow. I'm curious as to what was it about a brick and mortar business that you said, oh God, I don't want this.
It was 7 days a week, Jay. It was 12 to 14 hours a day. It was being locked in that one location, knowing that the world is a big place. I saw the amount of money coming in. I saw how expensive it was to run a business. There was a lot of costs that we couldn't control. We couldn't control a lot of things that were going on. There was new pizza places coming in. There was new Papa John's and Pizza Huts and a lot of competition, a lot of hours, not much money. I knew that there was other things that I wanted to be doing. So for me, a light bulb went off. I said, if this isn't what I want to do, why don't I seek out other people who are doing things that I want to do, the experts, the insiders in those fields, read some of their books and start to understand better things that they're doing so I can start my journey.
Now, there is another principle of building cash flow right there. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go with someone who's done it before and just duplicate. I'd say it. Imitate before you innovate. And I definitely appreciate you being an example in that. Now, you got to tell us, because I've heard this before. You bought an apartment with no money down. That's not possible. How is that possible?
Well, of course that's possible. And it was sometime around just past 2001, like I said, unfortunately, after September 11th, the interest rates dropped. So at the time, conventional financing, there were several ways you could do it. One was one loan at 100% financing through just a bank, or of course you could do 80-20, one loan at 80%, one loan at 20%, combine those, it's 100%. So for me at the time, I did zero down. It was owner occupied. When I needed some cash reserves or I needed to show a little bit of money, I did more creative things, like I had credit cards, did a little down payment. I'm not saying other people should definitely do this. I'm saying for me at the time, having nothing, having no money, having no credit, having what I thought not much going on, I really went after it. So for me, zero down, 100% financing, any little cash that I needed, I did credit cards, or I just saved up some money.
Exactly. Now, well, let's be clear. It's not that you didn't have anything. What you had was a wealth of desire and a ton of creativity to be able to give the persons that were going to give you the money what it is that they were looking for. I mean, at the end of the day, you use what you had to get what you need so you could have what you want. And that is, again, another excellent principle. But I know the timing isn't the best, when you say after September 11th, but where there's chaos, there's cash flow. So, the quote unquote stars aligned. And that's if the system doesn't ever break, we meaning you and I, the new entrepreneurs coming in, we never have the opportunity to get started. And then you did something that I think was very cool. You asked a very empowering question. You said, how can I? You said, hey, I like real estate and I like travel. Sometimes we go, oh, I can't do both. You said, how could I do both? Where did you get that mindset from?
I don't know where I got the mindset from, but I had a big enough reason to. At the time, I wasn't living a life that I wanted to lead. I know that I wanted to make more money. One of the great ways was real estate. I know once I started getting involved in real estate and got a little bit of money, I love to travel. So while I was traveling, of course, there's real estate there, right, Jay? It's the same principle. It's the same strategies and tactics that you might use in San Diego would transfer to Buenos Aires or Fortaleza, Brazil, or other markets. So for me, I had a big enough reason why. I studied people that were doing it. I tried to get around like-minded people. And then at some point, like Michael Masterson's book, Ready, Fire, Aim. You do your due diligence, you get ready, and then you go. And then once you go, whatever that you're trying to do, then you kind of adjust your course as you go. We're never going to be perfect. I'm not perfect today. I wasn't yesterday, Jay, and I won't be tomorrow, unfortunately, but that's okay because I can adjust my course as I go along, but nothing starts until I start.
I agree. But wouldn't you agree as well as that someone might say, okay, that's great for you. You can do it because you were 22. That's the time to start doing all of that international stuff. I can't do that today.
Well, I think that age doesn't matter. At the time, people would say, that's ridiculous. You're 22. You don't have any money. How are you ever going to get a bank to loan you money to buy a place? Wait a minute. Sight unseen in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And again, I don't recommend it, but that's crazy. Why would you ever do that? You're going to live in Panama City, or there's always they always tell us why we can't do it, Jay.
I know.
And like you, I'm like, don't tell me why I can't. I'm going to tell you why I can, and I'm going to show you how it's possible, because anything is possible. Doesn't matter your age or your sex or your race. None of that matters. Everything is possible. It's figuring out how to do it.
So what would you say are some of the other common things that you hear when people say, okay, I like the idea of being international, but I only speak one language, and how does this really going to work for me? Or what are some of the common things that you see that really aren't that big of a deal when it all boils down to it?
Yeah. At the time, for me, was not much money. It was not speaking the language. Let's be honest. You can get by on not speaking fluent in Spanish if you're in Latin America, or if you're in Brazil, Portuguese. You don't have to be fluent. Of course, it helps. Now, if you're doing contracts, you can get lawyers to help you out with that stuff. Families often say it. They say, well, traveling is just for the single 20-something-year-old male, a backpacker. But families can't do it because we either don't have jobs or we can't be a digital nomad, or we might have kids and our kids can't get schooling. There's great schools everywhere. You can do private schools, you can do homeschooling. So for all of these reasons why we're told that we can't, there's all those same reasons of why we can. You can be single, you can be married, you can be not speak very many languages, you can speak a lot of languages. Jay, there's one thing that I don't talk about quite a bit, but I know that you reveal a lot about yourself. So I think it helps put things in perspective. When we're talking about languages, as a for instance, I stuttered really, really bad my whole entire life. I couldn't even finish a sentence until about the age of 21 or 22. So when I hear people say things like language, or you don't know a language, or you have to be fluent, they're just kind of giving themselves excuses. Those are small little stumbling blocks, Jay, that we can all get over.
Agreed. And in fact, when we're afraid, any excuse will do, and we'll often take the one that our friends will reinforce the most. So, how did you, you've got to walk me through this. You know, one day you're in San Diego, and then the next day you go, "Hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I'm going overseas. See ya." How does that work?
Well, yes and no. For me, even though I sound like I'm kind of flippant and like I just do it, there's a lot of preparation. So for me, I was buying and selling real estate in San Diego. Jay, you're going to know the exact time that I'm talking about. I got involved in loans and real estate. I got my real estate license and broker's license. But for the most part, I was doing my own deals. So after 2001 and 2002, between that 2003, 2004, 2005, in San Diego, much like a lot of other areas in the U.S., I was doing real estate, I was doing loans. I was seeing that it was getting frothy. A lot of the things just simply weren't making sense. So I said, I need to have, and buying and selling in San Diego, you never really get the cash flow that you would in a lot of other markets anyways. So it never really makes sense. But it was getting frothy, and I was saying, I need to have an exit strategy. There needs to be a plan. What am I going to do? Yes, I can focus on other areas in San Diego or in California or the States, but I'm attracted to things overseas. I want a just-in-case plan or a strategy. So for me, it was looking at other markets. So I believe I started buying in Buenos Aires around 2003 or so. I traveled to a lot of different countries. I started buying in Panama City, Panama. So I was planning in 2003, 2004, 2005 that by late 2005, I said, okay, this is it. In my opinion, San Diego is topping out. If I'm in a position where I can sell, I'm not married, I don't have kids, it makes sense. I'm not tied to San Diego for a job. What I'm doing with a little bit of money can be done anywhere with the correct strategies. I'm going to plan for an exit late 2006 or early 2007. So that's what I did. And then I sold all the things that I had in San Diego, started buying in some other countries. So, and I actually remember the date. By March 15th, 2007 was my first full-time day in Panama City. And I've been overseas living full-time ever since.
Well, you know, some would say you timed the market rather well with those dates, my friend. Unfortunately, not everybody was able to do that. However, you bring up a very interesting question, because I know I deal with this a lot, and people ask me, you know, when they're looking to get started building their cash flow, getting started in real estate investing, they're like, okay, Jay, what market is the best one to start in? Now, here's the interesting thing. When they're asking me, they're typically only talking about the U.S., and that's, you know, a lot of square acreages or square footage to begin with. Now you're talking about the world. So you just expanded that question infinitely in so many directions. I have to ask you, where's the place to be?
Well, Jay, I don't want to be glib, and I don't want to not pick one. So first, let me give you a longer answer, and then I'll pick a few spots. But Jay, I'm a big believer in the grass is not always greener. There's not always an up-and-coming hot spot. For real estate, it's not like you can be an armchair quarterback quite as much like you can buying and selling stock. You can be at your computer, you can push buy, you can push sell, and it's easy. It's fairly liquid. You can buy and sell. For real estate, it's not quite like that. So I often hate where's the hot spot now? Because I'm going to jump into it. But the question is, what do you know about that market? Well, they don't know anything about that market. So then how is that the best market for you? If you don't know anything about the market, you don't know which agents to use or when to buy or when to sell, or can you get financing? Or do you set up some kind of entity? Or do you deal with lawyers? If you don't know all these ins and outs, how is that the best market for you? So for me, I think the best markets are the ones that I know best. Now, some markets that I like, and Jay, by the way, I have never been to Europe, so I don't want to comment on Europe because I don't like to speak in theory. I've been to Southeast Asia, to a lot of different countries, but a lot of countries in Southeast Asia is more leasehold and not freehold. So when I hear these things about Thailand or some of these other markets in Cambodia or Vietnam, when you can't really outright own it and get title, can you get around that? Yes, you can, but it just wasn't for me. Plus, it's 12 to 16 hours ahead. It's a completely different time frame. For me, it was Latin America. Some of the places I've bought and sold is Panama City, Panama, as well as Buenos Aires, Argentina, Fortaleza, Brazil, Coastal in Nicaragua. Some of the markets that I like right now, Jay, because I want to be in a market, in a city, in a capital that's close to an airport, that has tourists, that has infrastructures, that you can buy and sell apartments, or you can buy and rent out apartments. There's four main ones that I personally like: Panama City, Panama, Medellin, Colombia, Fortaleza, Brazil, and then one that is fantastic that I don't hear most people talking about is Lima, Peru.
Wow. Okay. So most of the things is Latin America is kind of your specialty. Would you say that?
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay. Totally understood. Now, so that we don't leave anybody behind, there were two concepts that I know are critical to this decision when you're thinking about going internationally or just holding a title or holding property outside your home country. You mentioned really quickly leasehold and freehold. And just for everyone's sake, can you just give them an understanding as to why that was important to you and what those things are?
Sure. Freehold would be title. So if you go to a country, let's say Panama, and it could be any country, but let's just use Panama because I have been in Panama. I understand it. You want to get freehold, which is title. It means that you can get title to the property. Leasehold would be like getting a lease. There's an area in Panama called Bocas del Toro, which is right of possession, ROP property, which is somewhat congruent with leasehold. It means that you don't own it. The government owns it or somebody else owns it, but you have rights to the property. Well, guess what? They can take it from you, theoretically, whenever they so chose, right? So for me, I would want to go in countries where I can get title. And if it's a country to where it's not so straightforward, where you can't get title, for me, it takes too much due diligence. And even if I can figure out, I have to keep in mind, if I'm looking at selling it, then I have to educate someone else as well, or else they have to get educated. So it just, there's too many hurdles for me.
That totally is totally understood, 100% in agreement. And the other thing that I want to point out is I want everyone to hear how he was concerned about his exit even before he went in, because if it's a hurdle for you going in, it's going to be a hurdle for the new buyer that comes in behind you. Not saying that you're going to sell, but if you're in a position where that's part of your strategy, you got to consider that before you acquire. Now, for me personally, one of the things that I tend to slant towards is countries that are on British common law. And from my limited experience, those countries are not the ones you mentioned. So I'm curious to understand, what it is about the law structure when it comes to Latin America that makes you happy and that you are able to understand and be able to operate business.
Well, I'm assuming one that you might be speaking of in Central America is Belize.
Yes, that's one.
There's a lot of places. We're talking about real estate, and real estate for me is the core of everything I do. But also when we're traveling and we have to be in an area for a long period of time, some areas, Jay, speak to me and some areas don't. I might go to Panama, and for some reason it speaks to me. It makes sense to me. And some other people might go to Panama City and say, I don't want to be in a concrete jungle that's Panama City. Belize speaks to me, or a coastal spot in Costa Rica. So I think a lot of areas, it depends. If you have to be there for a long time, and this goes back to I believe it's much more important to get on the ground, to get boots on the ground, to understand a local market, to meet with many agents, maybe some to buy, maybe some to sell. If you rent it out, do you do it with property management? Do you do it with vacation rentals? It's really important to get someplace, and if you like it, get integrated, make contacts, and to first understand what you're going to do with the property before you even get it. Because if you don't have an exit strategy, and for me, that's either rental or that's selling, then you shouldn't buy, because I see it every single day. Everybody sees it, especially at conferences, especially when people have a few drinks or a few cocktails. They're by the beach. They meet these friends. Everybody's laughing, right? It's this happy hour syndrome of where, oh, it's going to be so fantastic, I'm going to buy it. And then they buy it and they're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with it now?
Right. Oh, yeah, man. How have you and I not met before? I don't know. Because it, it sounds like these are the same things that I'm saying all the time. And I love it. It's just because it's international, it doesn't mean it doesn't apply. And having been to, Belize a number of times, I absolutely love the islands, not so much the mainland. The islands, yes, all in. But it's funny. I don't know if you talked to my wife ahead of time, but she's like, why don't we go to Costa Rica? So I'm assuming you've been there?
Yeah, of course. Of course, I lived in Panama for several years and have made many border runs to Costa Rica. I've been to a lot of different spots in Costa Rica, and also on my podcast, I've had, I think, 8 real estate agents from Costa Rica on it. So I'm pretty familiar with it. And for me, Jay, it didn't speak to me. For a lot of other expats from the States, there's really a few main areas, right? It's Mexico, it's Belize, it's Costa Rica, it's a little bit of Panama, it's a little bit of Nicaragua, it's a little bit more Colombia, a little bit more Ecuador now, and then, of course, some Caribbean islands. But Costa Rica is one of the number one spots that most expats from the U.S. or else Canada go.
Got it. So and you're beginning to bring up a very important topic. What are, in your opinion, because I don't want to precede the question or steer it any particular direction. What I want to know is, what are like your top 5 reasons for someone to begin considering investing outside of their home country?
All right. I've got a quick question for you. Not sure if you thought about this yet, but when you invest outside your home country, by default, it means in order for you to go to work, you get to go someplace cool. So just keep that in mind as you continue to listen to this episode. One thing I want to give you guys some more update on, just understand that the audiobook is on the way. Audiobook is on the way. All of you have been very, very patient. For those of you who've already pre-ordered, thank you. And I just want to make sure, if you want to get on the list, 949-682-3565. Keyword is audio, AUDIO, or cashflowdiary.com/audio. Either one of those will get you on the list. The point is, we are making much progress every day, and I'm excited about it because it is moving forward very, very fast. I know a number of you prefer to consume content that way, which is good, and I hope you go out there and continue to build your cash flow, obviously. So, speaking of cash flow, let's get to talking about some more international cash flow here.
That's a good question. And, the first thing that we all need to keep in mind is it's a different country. So, and I know this sounds like Taylor, that's no duh. Sometimes we forget it's a different country. Your money is going someplace else. You might be living someplace else. So you have to get in your mindset. Am I just not happy with my life? Or do I want to move to a different city in the States? Do I maybe not want to go? Do I want to go from San Diego to like Miami or whatever? Maybe I want to change it first in the States. So before I'm saying, hey, throw money overseas, maybe look at your own life, maybe sit down, write down some pros and cons and things that you like and don't like about your life, and first see if there's easy changes that you can make to your life in the States. But if you're going to go outside the States, I think it's number one very important to say, how am I going to make money? A lot of places are cheap. We've all seen the ads or the promotion that you can live like a king in Ecuador for $700 a month, or you can live in Thailand or the Philippines. But at the end of the day, you still need to make money. And if you want to get involved in real estate, you need to have some money coming in. Cash flow, of course, is always better. So I think number one, you need to figure out that you for sure want to live outside the States. It doesn't have to be permanent. Maybe you don't like it and you can go back. Maybe it's part-time. Maybe it's full-time. That's what you decide. Maybe number two, it might be, how am I going to support myself overseas to to make money. Number three, it might be how close to my friends or family in the States do I want to live? One of the reasons why people like Belize, it's 2.5 hours or so. If you're from LA or from Houston, or if you're from Miami, it's English speaking. It's an easy transition in Belize. There's a lot of expats already there. There's beautiful islands. There's the Cayo, which is the interior, right? There's a lot of things to like, but maybe you want to live close to the States. Of course, maybe you want to live far from the States and you say, I'm going to go to Southeast Asia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, a lot of things to like overseas. I think number four, why don't I stop at number three?
Well, the funny thing is that hearing you talk about this, I just came back, I was hanging out with Simon Black at his Entrepreneurship and Liberty camp in Lithuania. And there was people from literally all of the countries that you're mentioning. And, so for the first time for myself, I was actually considering some of the Asian countries because I've never been to that particular site. And then so these questions that I'm asking you are kind of real time. Like, what else should I be thinking about? Because primarily if it wasn't on British common law and if it wasn't English, so I was considering, Europe and the UK for sure. And I would be willing to consider Belize, obviously, but I was like, what in Australia, but I hadn't opened my mind up to anything outside of that. And that's part of why, speaking to you is important for me. So no, by all means, keep going with number 4 and 5.
And then Jay, things like language. We all say, I can easily learn a different language, and we all can, but it takes work. Do you want to learn Spanish or Portuguese? Then you can go in Latin America. If you don't, then you might choose, again, a place like Belize where you don't have to learn a transition. How important is cost of living? Even though it's in Latin America, we automatically think that we're going to get the same quality of life in a foreign country for half the price or 3/4 the price. That's not necessarily true. There's a reason why a lot of the lower income people in certain countries go to more prosperous countries. It's because they don't enjoy their life and they're going to some place that they think is better. And then in reverse, right, you're going to their countries that they're leaving from. So some of the things that they didn't like, you'll be experiencing. Maybe you think the cost of food or the quality is not what you thought. Maybe you need great hospitals, right? If you go to the interior of a lot of countries, they might not have access to hospitals or great roads. A lot of countries, Belize, I hate to say it, Jay Massey, although I know it's changing quite a bit, is like, and I know this is so silly, like Taylor, why even bring this up? Things like internet, right? If you're going to work online or use Skype like we're doing right now for free, or you need quick internet, I'm in Las Terrenas. Horrible internet, and you spend hundreds and hundreds a month to try and get decent internet. But guess what? If you need a day trade and you need 50 megas up and down or whatever these fast stats are, then that comes into play. So I think it all depends. You sit down and say, here's the things that are important, here's the things that aren't important, and then why don't I go fit these in certain countries? Yeah, no, I agree with you. Last time I was in Belize, they just got 4G, which is great. So it was awesome. So we could kind of do Skype a lot better than what I had done in the past. So it's, there is always these things that are changing, and these are the extra considerations. There's nothing like being on the ground. So let's talk about that for a second, because you did your first one without visiting. So I'm going to let's just assume that that's not the way you're recommending most people do it. But what would you say is the biggest benefits to physically being there in these foreign countries and as opposed to just by participating sight unseen? That's a great question. I absolutely do not recommend anybody to buy anything in a country that they have first never been to. Now, if you've already been to a location like Buenos Aires, and there's a couple of buildings that you might be looking at because you know the approximate cost per meter, the cost per square foot, you know the type of view, you know if it's city or if it's park. If you know those kinds of things, and you leave and you met some contacts and you say, hey, when something comes available for around this price, shoot me an email and I'll be interested, then that might make sense. Or if there's a developer and they have something off plan or pre-construction or some great terms, and you kind of know the developer, you know that he's a well-known local developer or a foreign all-star like a Simon Black in Chile or a Doug Casey in Argentina or a Leaf Simon and Kathy Petticord in Panama, where they have some track record and you can understand a little bit better where these deals are coming from, then that might make more sense. But Jay, I'm a big believer, unfortunately, in work and in being on the ground in these locations. Because why? Because someone's going to tell you a price. Is that a good price or a bad price for Panama City? I don't know. Is it the old colonial zone in Casco Viejo? Is it oceanfront? Is it an old reverted area? Unless you've been there, you have no idea. There could be apartments in a building, but if one of them is being promoted, you think is oceanfront, but it comes to find out it's not oceanfront, it's behind the building, it's a city view, but you paid it for an oceanfront apartment, then that's not a good buy. So for me, it's crucially important at some time to have been in the location. You meet local agents. You might meet a couple to buy. You might meet a couple to sell because they might specialize in different things. You want to see how are you going to make money, or if you're going to rent it out, or you can use property management. Then you might want to meet with a few companies. You might combine property management with renting it out on short-term sites like Airbnb or HomeAway or Flipkey or VRBO. If you go that route, will someone check them in and check out? So you need to deal with lawyers, right? Are you going to set up some kind of entity? You can't just keep it in your name and the property's in Belize. What happens if you die? It has to be in some entity. Do you want to do a country, a will in the country? Do you want to set it up in some kind of entity? So there's all these things that you need to put in place or have an idea that when a deal comes along, I can work the numbers. If I rent it, here's the approximate rent. If I think I'm buying under value, I think I can possibly sell it. So you have all these things in place and your own circle of trusted contacts, so then you can act when the time comes.
You know, what's funny is that in all of that, the one thing you didn't mention is the word that I hear the most is taxes. How is the taxes is going to work? But not Belize. Please believe me when I say this. I'm not saying suddenly we've got to talk about taxes because Lord knows we don't want to put anybody to sleep. But the point is that that's an additional consideration. But yet, even with all of that, Taylor, it sounds like to me, now maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like to me that even though it's international, it still comes down to relationships. And if it comes down to relationships, is international real estate really that different than investing in your home country?
No, for me, it comes down to relationships with people, and it comes to your own strategies and tactics. I say it all the time, and I know people get tired of me saying it because it's so true. And that's why I say it's more important to get on the ground and to be in the know with people and with deals and a set plan of buying and selling or buying and renting out or buying to live in than it is to chasing what's hot at the time. It's like chasing a hot stock, right? You want to have good strategies and tactics so you understand it might be hot, but the price to income ratio and all these different things. Nothing changes when it comes to real estate. You want to make sure you have the correct things in place, the correct structure, the correct ideas in place first so you can make the best decisions.
Awesome. And that's at the end of the day, that it's what it comes down to. And any one of us, you listening to my voice, our voices right now, you have the ability to develop that. So, okay, say here, let's just play, devil's advocate for a second, Taylor. So why on earth would I consider, but my home country is so great. What are the reasons that I would even want to consider taking on this extra risk, this extra, as you call it, work, in the first place?
That's a great question. For me, it was fun. It was different. It was experiencing more in life. The world's a big place. I wanted to go see it. When I first started, of course, I didn't know any better. And Jay, we've all heard the expression, if you don't know anything, then you don't know anything to know that you don't know anything, right? So as you go along, you start learning a few more things. But I think, people want to experience more. They want to try different cultures, different foods. They want to try different weathers or different locales. And it doesn't have to be permanent. It doesn't have to be, I don't like Obama, I don't like Bush, I don't like FACTA, I don't like whatever. So I'm going to go someplace else, and automatically it's completely different, and it's siesta and it's fiesta 24/7, because unfortunately that's not true. Every country that you go to has their own currencies. They have their own politics. They're always talking about currencies and politics and things are too expensive and not cheap enough and taxes. So you don't get away from that just because you go to someplace new. And as a matter of fact, I hate to say it gets a little bit more complicated and confusing because you're adding more fuels to the fire. You're adding a few more things in there, right? But I think it's important that you want to do it because it's fun and there's other things in life to do. I don't think it's a good idea, Jay, necessarily to want to go to a different country with the idea that it's this place that you're going to get rid of something from the States. Right. So if we're a U.S. citizen, unless you legally expatriate, you always have to file income taxes. You always at some point have to pay taxes. There's always laws and rules that you have to abide by. So you don't get rid of those just because you might be living in Belize.
Yeah, right. The passport follows you around everywhere you go. But wouldn't one of the other considerations, at least for me, I know for myself and for my wife, one of the other reasons that international real estate, be it Costa Rica, Europe, UK, Switzerland, Thailand, Hong Kong, doesn't really matter, anywhere, is the idea of being able to have a just in case or plan B or a second passport or any of those reasons. Was that ever in your consideration as part of why you would want to consider especially living full time now overseas?
Yes, absolutely. For me, part of the reason why I've spent so much time in Panama, in Uruguay, in between Argentina and Brazil, Dominican Republic. For me, I wanted to open bank accounts overseas in different currencies. I wanted to seek legal residency in a different country and hopefully citizenship, which I'm trying to do right now in the Dominican Republic. I've spent a lot of time on this over the course of several years and a lot of money. So for me, it's a fallback plan. Just in case, if something were to happen to the United States, what would I do? Could I go to another country? If so, can I have a bank account? Can I have currencies? If the dollar was to go to zero, let's just pretend, what would I do? If I needed to have a hideout for some reason in some other country, could I legally stay there for a long period of time? Of course, you could be a PT or a passing through, a traveler, and go do that. Can I get citizenship in some other country as a just in case? So for me, that put a big portion into it.
Yep, I agreed. And interestingly enough, it was Simon who began to help me understand my need and desire to do that more and more and more. Curious to know if someone's considering, say, you know what, how do you go about picking the country? I mean, it's like there's too many to choose from. That's the problem. You can't visit them all. How do I say this one first? How did you manage that?
That's a very good question. And I think now, knowing a few years later, that's why I kind of go back to that. And I know it seems so childish. And I think it's important to write down a list, and you write down things that are important to you and things that aren't important to you. And if you want to live close, like I said before, like within a couple hours, and you choose a country that is within a couple of hours. If real estate is very, very important, then you want to choose a country that you can buy and sell real estate. If you're buying and selling real estate and you want rental income, then you'd want to select a city in that country to where you think that you can get rental income. One, I don't want to be too confusing, but two, this all doesn't have to be the same country. You might seek citizenship in one, right? It's that 5 or 6 flags thing that Simon talks about quite a bit. You can be born in one country. You can have a playground in a different country. You can have an offshore entity holding your assets in a different country. You can bank in a different country, and it can, go on from there. But I think it all starts with trying to find a few places that you personally like. I mean, I think we bring it down to kind of grassroots. And you have to live in a country that you like. It doesn't matter if your tax rate's 4%, not 8 or not 50, or right, or like, the internet's 3 mega slower, or the price of my beer is 50 cents. Like, at the end of the day, it's like you have to decide what's important to you and like what's not important.
Well, hey, the price of beer could be that deciding factor for some. And I know for me, the internet is a huge one, because as most people know, we operate completely virtually. You never know where I'm recording podcasts from, where we're broadcasting from, what we're doing. But I promise you, it's not in a brick and mortar office, because it's not just the way we choose to live anymore. So I find it funny, the things that could be up there on the top of the charts. And so you're saying there's nothing wrong with letting it be that arbitrary.
I don't think so, because at the end of the day, we all have to wake up in a bed. If it's too hot, if it's too noisy in Panama City, maybe we don't like that. Maybe you have to like the food. It can be as small as you make it. Once you start living in foreign countries a little bit more, or in different environments, then a lot of these things don't matter. It being hot and humid to me, it doesn't quite matter as much. Whether a beer is cheaper or expensive, those kinds of things are arbitrary to me. It doesn't really matter anymore. So I think it all depends on things that are important to you in your life, and those are going to change. Buying and selling real estate is important in one aspect, but then you get involved in it and you say, this country is a little tougher. I don't understand all the ins and outs, or I had a few bad experiences. That might change. So you might go to a different country. Or if you kind of get tired and you say, you know what, I don't really want to live in one country. Why can't I buy apartments in a few countries, live in them a few months out of the year, and then rent them out of a few months of the year and get cash flow coming in? Then you might say, oh, I'll pick a few select markets for that. So I think it really depends on how you want to live every day of your life.
Agreed. And what I love is that you are talking about the concept that I know Tim Ferriss talks about, and is just lifestyle design. Design the lifestyle, work around it, make it happen in those particular ways, as opposed to the reverse. And that's it's the core, it's the essence of what gets me excited and keeps me excited about what it is that we get to do. And everybody needs a place, like I said, to live, work, play, or lay. And we get to participate in that. We get to choose that for ourselves in any way, shape, or form. So, what would you say has been, like you mentioned a bad experience, what has been probably one of the most shocking things in all of your travels that you've encountered going, wow, I didn't know it meant this?
Wow, Jay, that is a very reflective question. I don't want to be shallow on the answer. So let me think about that for a second. One of the most shocking things, I think, one thing that we learn from living outside of our home country, wherever your home country is, if you go to a new country, it's new experiences, and sometimes not getting caught up with constantly comparing back to our home countries. So if you're constantly comparing prices or experiences, or there's a Costco, or there's a Walmart, or why isn't there a Vons, or right, it's all those things. Or I speak English, let's pretend, and I don't speak Spanish. So if I speak English louder, somehow the Spanish speaker is going to understand me, right? Or why is it done this way? I'm so smart. Why don't I just tell them the correct way of doing things? Oh no, this is how it's done in the States. Like, you guys don't understand. This is how it's done. This is how you guys should do it, right? So I don't know about crazy. I can tell you, Jay, one thing that's not good in a foreign country, and again, this is shallow, is losing a passport. Jay, I don't know if you've ever done this, but losing a passport in a foreign country is kind of a nightmare. If you've ever gone through it, you kind of wonder, why is the embassy or consulate in a foreign country? If I go into the foreign country to try to get my passport, and then they have hours from 9:30 to 9:45 just on a Tuesday, right? And then you have to do notarize and apostille and all these, photocopy pictures, blah, blah, blah. And then they send it back to the States anyways. And it takes weeks and weeks. And you're like, if I was in the States, I could get this overnighted or done in 2 days. Why can't? So, that's just one of those irritating things.
Yes, I hear you completely. That is the double-edged sword, is having grown up and it's one of the things that I learn every time I go international. I love it. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then occasionally those thoughts creep in, back home, it's faster, or this is better. And how can I have this part of home here? And wherever I am. So I'm just laughing. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I've not had that experience with with having to go to the embassy. So, I can only imagine the stress that would cause, especially because I'm sure the hours everything is different. Nothing is open when you think it's be open. I remember when I was in Estonia, and what happened, I was in Estonia and I was looking for something to eat. And I went to McDonald's. Now I'm sitting here thinking, okay, it's McDonald's. It's not exactly the healthiest place in the planet, but the McDonald's there was not just a McDonald's. It had an ice cream shop, and they were playing music, and it was literally the hangout spot, disco music on the wall with LCD screen TVs. And I'm just like, this is McDonald's? There was no, needless to say, there was no play place, right? There was no place for the kids to play. It was definitely a different experience. So let's go the other direction. What have been some of the things that when you've traveled, you go, wow, I wish people in the US could experience this?
I think one thing that pops out is, and maybe it's because you're a tourist in their country, but a lot of times you meet people and they're so friendly. Like, people are so nice. I know it's so cliche when you hear people and they live in a foreign country. One of the first things that they say is, wow, people are so nice. Sometimes we forget, the hellos and the please and the goodbyes. And when you walk by someone, you don't have to look down. Like, I know you see me. Like, why don't you say hi, right? So if you're in Latin American country, it might be buenos dias or buenas, or it might be something. So one of the things that comes to mind is being friendly or kind of enjoying friends and family a little bit more. Now, I know a lot of people do it in the States, so it really depends on what your time frame is, or like where you're coming from. But I think being friendly, enjoying, kind of going back to ground roots and enjoying some of the great things in life. Like, if the sun's out that day, is it really, really pretty? Or you get around with friends or family, and there's a really good barbecue, and you enjoy the really great barbecue, and you might have something to drink, and you just sit there and you talk and you hang out. I think a lot of times when you go overseas, those are the first things that you start to do, maybe because you didn't think about doing it before in the States or wherever you're coming from, and you just enjoy it a little bit. So that's how you can kind of like different countries. But Jay, if you don't mind, one of the things that you were talking about and why, number one, moving overseas doesn't have to be permanent, and overseas is any place that you're not, is you can pick a few select spots that you might like. So for Jay, if you like the beach areas in Belize, that might be great for you a few months out of the year during the summer if the weather's not too extreme. But then your wife might say, hey, Jay, why don't we buy something in coastal Costa Rica, and we'll live there for a couple months out of the year when it's good. And when we're not there, we might rent it out. And then you might say, well, why don't we go in Chile? Why don't we get something with Simon Black in Sovereign Valley or something close to it? Then you might spend a few months there. So there's all these options. If we go back to the real estate angle, that you can do with cash flow real estate, because you can live in it for a few months out of the year if you so choose. And then if you so choose, when you're not living there, you could rent it out and have cash flow coming in.
Yes. And I'm hoping my wife doesn't listen to this, because you're making me lose every argument I have ever had on the idea of not going to Costa Rica. Thanks. But it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
It's because it's true, Jay, because not one place is going to tick all those boxes, right? So it's not going to tick everything for you. It's not going to be always the best food or the best weather or the best locale or the best banking or the best, all these different, or the closest. So it might be okay to spend part of the year wherever you want and kind of pick a few different spots.
Agreed. I'm with you. I'm with you. And I will say this, everywhere except the U.S. has great cell phone plans compared to the U.S. I have seen that, especially when I've been in Europe. Their cell phone plans are absolutely phenomenal. And I'm just like, wow, I wish we could have that one.
And speaking of fast internet, I hear that in a lot of countries in Eastern Europe, they have extremely fast internet.
Yeah, I didn't have any problems, in general when I was in Lithuania just a little bit ago. And it's just amazing some of the things that they value, and you can see how those differences apply for sure. So because this topic is so vast, and I'm sure we've probably opened up a can of worms, for those who want to track you down and find out more and ask you some questions, what's the best way that it would be for them to be able to understand a little bit more about this whole international, becoming more international and living international and investing international? How can they get more of you, Taylor?
Of course, my main website is internationalrealestatelistingscom. From there, they can find my Overseas Property Insider podcast, and I welcome emails at taylor@internationalrealestatelistingscom.
Excellent. We definitely appreciate you being here today. What else would you like to share with us?
Jay, there's so much to talk about, but one of the things I think a great way of ending this is I'm about action. And I think going back to Michael Masterson's book, at some point, the ready, fire, aim, you do your due diligence, you read some books, you attend some conferences, some online conferences, you get ready, you fire, which means that you go, you're going to learn from some things that you're doing. And then it's always okay, Jay, to adjust your course, and you can always go back. It doesn't always have to be permanent.
Excellent. Definitely appreciate you being here, sir.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you know what it's time to do. It's time to move at the speed of instruction. You've got some very clear direction. Go over to the website, internationalrealestateliftings.com. Explore, understand, listen to the podcast. If international investing even intrigues you just a little bit, well, now you have an excuse to leave the country, right? Instead of just wondering, what is it like? Or are those really the beaches over there? Or does that palm tree really, is it really that green? The answer is yes. Go see it, go touch it, go experience it for yourself. As they have said before, and I'm sure no one says this anymore, you only live once. Might as well go out there and experience something completely different. And I am glad that you've taken the time to listen here today. I look forward to talking to all you guys again soon. Until next time.
Thank you for investing your time with Jay Massey and the Cash Flow Diary. When you have a moment, please visit iTunes and leave a positive comment about the show. And go now to our website, cashflowdiary.com, to take advantage of our free business building course, Cash Flow Foundation. Gain the knowledge, understanding, and skill that will teach you how to never need a job again. Until next time.